AMB.org.
Now, the state of the Afghanistan war. We'll hear from former Ambassador to Afghanistan Ronald Neumann and Max Boot of the Council on Foreign Relations. They evaluate progress being made in Afghanistan and talk about this week's NATO military conference in Lisbon. This event was held at the Army-Navy Club in Washington, D.C. Because of technical issues, we join this a couple of minutes in.
And I'll introduce our distinguished panel members just prior to their making remarks. So listen, I was in Afghanistan in September. I did another assessment for General Petraeus. I had done many for him in Iraq in 2007 and 2008, and after he sort of parachuted into Afghanistan somewhat unexpectedly, he asked me to come over and take a look and give him some feedback, which I did for 2.5 weeks and went to just about all the contested areas, saw our troops, local government officials, a lot of time with Afghan National Army and police, and a fair amount of time with the people themselves to understand what is really happening. My judgment is that, number one, I'm very encouraged. Number two is we're beginning to turn the momentum around to our favor in Afghanistan. And we still have a tough, hard fight on our hands. Make no mistake about that. But I'm convinced that if the momentum continues, and my judgment tells me it will, by next spring, we will have definable progress. That'll be self-evident to anyone. And most of my feedback is somewhat anecdotal, to be sure, as you would expect, but I trust it because I had similar feedback very early on in the surge in Iraq. I was there in February when the troops went in and came back a few months later, and I began to see very similar preliminary signs that the surge was working. So what are these signs, number one? Well, first of all, is the erosion of will of the enemy and a breakdown of some of their morale. Now, how do we get that information? Well, first of all, we listen to their radio traffic every day, and we listen to their cell phone traffic, whether it's antenna-based or satellite-based. So we get a volume of information on what is their attitude, behavior, what do they think about what's happening. And their morale is being eroded by the prosecution of now comprehensive combat operations against them. The second thing is, this was a focus area for me, is every task force commander at battalion or brigade level that I spoke to had evidence of Taliban that were willing to reintegrate. That means to cross over. Every single one of them. Some had just a handful, and others had as much as 200 to 300. And that is a very significant factor. And General Petraeus has put in play a program with President Karzai's approval that will, one, employ, and two, pay people to come and reintegrate. And the name of that program is Afghan Local Police, a la Sons of Iraq in Iraq. In Iraq, that program grew to 110,000 and was decisive in the war. In Afghanistan, we do not know what that number will grow to, but it will be in the thousands to be sure, and that it will have a profound impact on the speed at which we can achieve stability and security. So why is this happening? Well, it's happening because we have a decisive force. That's the reality of it. The additional 30,000 that the president gave to the command, added to what we had already had there from NATO, largely U.S., coupled with the Afghan National Army, which is now a capable force, it is decisive. It's decisive because it can operate comprehensively against the operational framework of the enemy at the same time in all the contested areas. We've never been able to do that. We've always had to be selective. That's the reality of it. So this is a decisive force, and it is now beginning to have some impact on this enemy. The second thing is the people are fed up with war, much as they were in Iraq. and this is 9 years now, and they're fed up with it, and they're very susceptible to supporting our efforts once we're able to put people on the ground and stay there and continue to support them and be willing to sacrifice ourselves to do that. And the third thing is Petraeus himself. I mean, he's touched every aspect of the command: geopolitical, strategic leadership, tactical, operational leadership. He's brought in, buttressed by the success in Iraq, he's brought an attitude that we can win this thing, it's doable, it's hard, but it's not hopeless, and we can win. And those are the terms that he uses, and he's got the entire command on the same page. No reflection of Stan McChrystal, a great general officer who we have tremendous regard for, but let's just be frank. I mean, Petraeus is one of a kind, and he's having some profound impact on this war. So the 2014 that is now being discussed in Lisbon and was announced by government officials of the United States as a reasonable target date for us to move toward, and beginning transition probably next year and move towards that as some sort of an objective date. I think that's reasonable. I came to that conclusion myself and told that to General Petraeus when I was there in September. But there's a big but. And the but is this: sanctuaries in Pakistan. We don't make 2014 transition complete in terms of our objectives if those sanctuaries continue unimpeded in their support for the insurgency that's raging inside Afghanistan. And I may say that those sanctuaries are aided and abetted by the government of Pakistan, by the military in Pakistan. That's the harsh reality of it. If the Pakistanis do not pull the plug on those sanctuaries, or we do not take those sanctuaries down ourselves, it's hard to imagine us meeting a satisfactory 2014 date. So that's the big but. Now, I think once we start making some progress here, definable progress, that the Pakistanis can see, I think they recognize then the tables are turning on them, in the sense that the Taliban is not going to stay in control or regain control of Afghanistan. The United States is not precipitously leaving they and also the Taliban in charge. And Afghanistan has always been a strategic buffer for them, and they've been hedging their strategic objectives here simply because of the harsh reality of their never been convinced of the U.S. commitment. I think that commitment is there. It's obvious. It's going to stay, and it's going to turn the tables in Afghanistan. And I believe our diplomats will have some leverage to turn the tables with the Pakistanis as well. And I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to introduce my colleague to my left here. This is Ambassador Ronald Neumann, and it's really a pleasure to have him on this panel because of his vast amount of experience. Formerly a Deputy Assistant Secretary, he served 3 times as ambassador to Algeria, Bahrain, and finally to the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan from July 2005 to 2007. Before Afghanistan, Mr. Newman was a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, serving in Baghdad from February 2004 with the Coalition Provincial Authority, and then as the Embassy Baghdad's principal interlocutor with the multinational command, where he was deeply involved in coordinating the political part of military action. I think that was another 16-month tour that he